Nowhere are rising costs hitting Americans harder than at the gas pump and the grocery store, places we spend 25 cents of every dollar we earn.
It really is a very significant drag on our economy at a very difficult time.
Over the last year, the cost to fuel our cars has jumped more than 33%, but it's the 3.1% rise in food and drink costs that's hurting consumers the most. That's because, on average, Americans spend 3 times as much for food as they do for gas.
I'm Brad Stewart, president of eFoods, and I'm joined today by our CEO and founder, Steve Shank.
Well, thanks a lot, Brad. I'm really happy to be on the call and to share some of the information that we've gleaned over the last bunch of years. You say 3 decades, and that kind of scares the daylights out of me, but that's okay. The fact is that there's information that people need to understand that is impacting them right now, and that will affect whether they'll be able to buy food in the future.
You know, Steve, most of us, or many of us, are really concerned about the state of our economy, the uncertainty of our jobs, our careers, the natural disasters, thousands in just the last few months. All of which bring us to the subject that I know you're passionate about. It's near and dear to your heart, which is food, our greatest dependency. And there's so many factors that impact that. In fact, you use the term, these factors can and do wipe out food. We're going to talk more about that. But speaking of food, price and availability are a big part of what happened. So I want to jump right in and just kind of talk a little bit about the things that you consider that wipe out food. Currency wipes out food in America, and I know you're going to talk a little bit about the history of money and the debtor nation that we're becoming. You always say the banks are the primary reason for our worldwide famine. That's a hard one for me to understand. I know you're going to share some more on that. I know, I get the whole world's greatest debtor. I was listening to another radio show just last week, a national radio show. I had to pull over off the side of the road because they said our national debt was over $14 trillion. And then when they started tying the interest to it, I was speechless. I literally pulled off the side of the road. They said it was taking $41 million an hour is the interest on our national debt. $41 million an hour is the interest on $14 trillion. And then he said $12,000 a second. I thought, will we ever dig out of that one? I don't see how. And then he said, he made it personal. He said, every American household, if they take their share of the national debt, it's $140,000 per American household, equates to what their share of the national debt is. And just 5 years ago, it was only $90,000. I mean, think of that. I don't like to think about it because it makes me nervous. You say that war wipes out food. When we have an active military and they're all over the place or in countries, we're going to feed the military before we feed our citizens. You talk about oil prices as wiping out our food. Well, I know we're an energy economy. I know that people get very nervous about affording gas for their car, and we're consumption based. I don't want to stop driving my car, Steve. And then you always round out and say that our economy is so tied to exports. At one time you said, not many years ago, we could create food 5 times over for our nation. Now we only, I think it's just a little over 50%, and the rest of it we're bringing in. We're exporting our food and pulling in other, it's just, the ratio's skewed, and we're at risk because of it. And then the ethanol thing, I was gassing my car the other day, saying up to 10% of the ethanol. I know you get your dander lit up when it comes to ethanol and how it's impacting our country. Those are the subjects we're going to talk to more in debt. More in debt. Yeah, we're in debt. We're going to talk more about these things in depth. So you've spent almost, Steve, 3 decades. You are a noted authority in this country on food, the preservation, production, and storage thereof. But storing food is critical, but it's the quality of food. I've never really thought much about it. I bought a lot of it for my family years ago. I put no thought into the quality of that food. I didn't get it. You've now rightly conditioned me. eFoods, our whole passion is quality tasting, nutritious, nutriversally appealing, and versatility. And I think you reinvented the wheel when you came up with the gourmet types of products that can all be packaged in very quick and easy, convenient ways. You championed the idea of this nutriversal seal of promise. And what I love about that is you've not just set the bar, you've got the bar when it comes to food that's cholesterol free and a great source of fiber. I love the no hydrogenated oil. That's a big one to my spouse. You've got vegetarian products, no added MSG, no genetically modified. My cousin's got issues with gluten, so we've got gluten-free products, soy-free products, irradiation-free products, all made here in the USA. There's like 20 some odd plus symbols you've created. That's what makes you different. 30 years, your experience, and what you're trying to do. So with that, let's jump right in, Steve, and take a moment and talk about what really is detailing the issues that we're all feeling as Americans.
Well, very simply, we've got a situation right now where all of the fears that people are having right now in what is now referred to as the Greatest Depression are connected with things they have virtually no control over. You can't control how much money the government is printing, which is absolutely way out of hand. You can't control the oceans heaving themselves beyond their bounds, the earthquakes in diverse places, the wars and rumors of wars, all of the kind of things that people are looking at. And a lot of times we're looking at a country where in 1959, as you mentioned, we could feed the entire world 5 times over, and now we're importing more than 40% of our food from other countries. And a lot of it doesn't even meet the standards that are required of Americans in growing their food, because they're laced with fertilizers, insecticides, and all the things that make you go bump in the night.
So when you talk about currency and not having access to financing and the history of money, I mentioned the debt issue. How do you believe that not having access to financing and the situation with that is impacting America today?
Well, we've got things are absolutely goofy. We've got the environmental movement, which justifies cutting off 50% of the water to California, and then the banks, after the bailout, took the opportunity to cut back on lending money, which is fascinating. And now farmers in large parts of the country have to prove that they have the water to finish out a crop. In other words, go through the planting and the tilling and the harvesting in order to get the loan. But then they cut off the water to the farmers, so they can't prove that they get it. And so we've got large percentages of our cropland that's actually shut down.
You mentioned something to me, that commodities investing really is what's creating the worldwide shortages of food and the farmers' access to financing. And you said, I think it was in the 30s, what took place that changed the whole dynamics?
Well, the interesting thing that happened in the 30s and all the way up to 1995, the bankers and the financial organizations, investment organizations, were looking at the fact that the one greatest investment that you can have is food, because everybody has to have it. It's a control mechanism, very simply. But the fact is that in 1995, the move was made to allow people who didn't have any vested interest in a commodity. In other words, they didn't require them any longer to take possession of a commodity that they bought. Like, for example, if we were to buy futures corn out, September corn this year, we now, as a result of that, bankers and investment organizations are in a situation where they very simply don't have to take delivery. They don't even have to be in the business of working with that particular commodity anymore. They used to. But now anyone can buy up your food and sell it on the market, where in the 6th year of a worldwide famine, where China is literally going around buying up countries and farming them and sending the food back to China, we've got a situation where the bankers, by cutting back on the loans, by controlling the commodities market and allowing anyone to invest in commodities and buy your food and sell it to the highest bidder, which is going outside the United States, in a country where every place else in the world, the large population centers are putting restrictions on exports. The United States has no restrictions on exporting your food to other countries.
Well, that segues, that's just one. The access to financing is one of the big 5 you talk about. And of course, as I was listening to the radio show, talk to us a little bit about the world's largest debtor. You talk about funny money, it wipes out our food. It's obvious with 14 trillion in debt, we are the world's largest debtor, or if not, we're becoming that. And people know it. They just sense the instability in everything because of this massive debt and the cost to service it, let alone Medicare, Social Security. I'm just talking about the national debt. Talk to me a little bit about this world's largest debtor. How's that wiping out food?
Well, very simply, other countries are collecting more of our currency than we have. For example, China literally owns about 40% of our country as a result of the fact that they own more of our money than we have. And so it's cheap to them, and they can very literally come in and buy us out.
Well, we keep printing money. I know that's pretty obvious. We keep printing money. It's not tied to gold. I think it was back in the 70s you've talked about where that whole gold standard thing shift. This is the funny money part of it. And what's happening there. Talk to me a little bit about this $14 trillion debt, the funny money, the printing. Obviously, we know it's there, directly or indirectly. How's that putting us at great risk?
Well, very simply, the dollar's about to crash. Other countries are starting to say, hey, we don't want to use the dollar as a standard for buying oil.
That's the reserve currency we talk about. We
That's
set the benchmark
currency
for all currency.
That's right. And when that happens, we're going to have a situation where literally the dollar that you have in your pocket is going to be so worthless that we'll have something very similar to what happened
Global
in
has
Germany,
been perfecting the
where a
process
loaf
by
of
which we
bread
make our food
doubled
reserves.
in value.
We start by using only the finest sun-ripened and fresh produce grown and harvested following the Good Agricultural Practices guidelines. Not only are our ingredients GAP certified, but we carefully test them for chemical and microbial contaminants like Salmonella and E. coli before the approved ingredients are blended into our exclusive recipes following strict quality control standards established and audited by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. These ingredients contain no trans fats, no hydrogenated oils, and no MSG. At eFoods Global, we do not freeze dry our food because the freeze drying process removes moisture and infuses chemicals into the food to prolong the shelf life. All of our ingredients are dehydrated only using low heat, and no chemical preservatives are ever added. Our dehydration process naturally preserves the food so that upwards of 92% of the nutritional value remains intact. These quality ingredients are then packaged in moisture-resistant, light-resistant, proprietary assurance packaging that is flushed with carbon dioxide to prevent oxidation and guarantee longer shelf life and quality before sealing the package. Finally, we date stamp the outside of the package the day we prepare the food reserves, so you know you're getting fresh food reserves. eFoods Global Reserves, when properly stored, maintain their flavor and quality for up to 25 years. Now, I know what you're thinking. These can't possibly be the reserves. But these delicious meals are exactly what you get when you prepare your eFoods Global meals. And none of these meals require more than a pot of boiling water, the contents of a package, and 10 to 20 minutes. Pretty soon, you are going to select some of these delicious meals to try for yourself for free. That's a great opportunity. Let's talk about some other opportunities eFoods Global has to offer you.